One thing that I think most people forget about the new Batman cartoon, Batman Caped Crusader, is that it had been in development for about 5 years before it was released. The series experienced a number of unfortunate delays thanks to the global pandemic, writers' strikes, actors' strikes, and the Warner Brothers Discovery merger that saw the show being sold off to Amazon. As an aside, some people point to that sale as a sign of Warner Brothers' lack of faith in the project, but in reality, it's more like they were selling the family silver to keep the lights on. Now, the reason I bring up how long the show was in development is that 5 years ago, Jeffrey Wright had been cast as the primary on-screen James Gordon, and there was a Batgirl movie in development which would go on to star Leslie Grace, and would be cancelled by Warner Brothers so they could write it off for tax purposes. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. All of that was a kind of roundabout way of talking about why the Gordons are African American in Caped Crusader. Matt Reeves, who directed the Batman, is also a producer on Caped Crusader. Granted, he's not as hands-on as Bruce Timm or James Tucker, but he has a say. And if that upsets you, the important thing to remember is that these versions don't somehow erase everything that came before, or will come afterwards. It's just a different version. Because there's no point in just doing exactly the same thing over and over again. With that minor point aside, and I know it only really applies to a vocal minority that were unhappy about that change, let's talk about who this version of Barbara Gordon is. While Barbara Gordon has had a variety of careers over her near 60-year existence, librarian, politician, police officer, this Barbara Gordon is a lawyer. And not just any lawyer, a public defender, someone that represents the poor and often the guilty. And that's a very important point. It's clear that Barbara is a talented lawyer. Harvey Dent even says he wishes he could get her to join his team, but she has morals and a very clear worldview. Barbara believes in the shades of grey, that sometimes there are reasons why people commit crimes, and that the context behind their situation should be considered when determining the appropriate punishment. And it's her career as a lawyer that brings her the most satisfaction in life. She helps people that society has turned its back on, the downtrodden, the destitute, sometimes even hardened criminals. Barbara's mission in life isn't a financial reward, but a spiritual one, in knowing that she has helped someone and made a difference to their lives. It's the same desire that motivated meek librarian Barbara Gordon in the comic books to leap to the defense of Bruce Wayne when he was being attacked by Killer Moth, and most importantly, to keep being Batgirl. And that's kind of why I don't think that this version of Barbara Gordon will become a vigilante in this series. I mean, first of all, she works very long hours. When would she find the time? And most importantly, she already gets that same satisfaction from helping people in court. If anything, she's the person that might clean up after Batman strikes. Yes, some villains like the Penguin or Clayface are totally unrepentant and they don't deserve her help. They probably wouldn't want it either. But the everyday man that is driven to a life of crime because of poverty or other societal reasons, and is unlucky enough to get caught? That's the kind of person that Barbara wants to help. Having said that, Caped Crusader contains some very nice nods to Barbara's role as Batgirl. The first and most obvious one is the fact that whenever she has to leap into action, be that defending her father from hitmen or fending off the Penguin's henchmen, she wears a purple suit. A deliberate callback to the 1960s TV show's version of Batgirl's costume. Likewise, Barbara keeps a baseball bat in her office and uses it when she thinks that she's about to be set upon by ruffians. We also see Barbara use a bat to try and free Batman from his cell in the stress of her regard. Get it? Batgirl? Yeah, very droll. In the first episode in Treacherous Waters, we see the kind of defense lawyer Barbara is as she defends a young man being prosecuted as the ringleader of a smuggling gang. Barbara argues that it's absurd to think that this man orchestrated the whole thing. He simply took the wrong job and is being left to take the fall for the illegal acts. Note that she doesn't argue his innocence, more that he is not the mastermind and should not be punished as one. Harvey Dent also notes that, while he is aware that the man likely isn't the boss, he's being made an example of because he wouldn't cooperate with Dent and take a deal. Barbara is idealistic. She represents people to get them a fair deal, even if they're guilty. Some of this idealism can potentially be explained by her upbringing. While her father had been a beat cop in the worst area of Gotham for decades, his family lived outside of the city in a nice suburban neighborhood. Barbara didn't have to see the grime and the crime up close every single day, unlike her father. or Renee Montoya. So she's able to step back and be more philosophical about crime and punishment. Montoya chastises Barbara for being a typical Richie. Don't fancy going to the effort of making the city better? It's easier to just move to the suburbs where it looks nice and forget about all the problems of the city. Although Barbara is quick to point out that her neighbourhood was just across the river and she lived in her grandfather's house. Hardly the life of luxury. Barbara clearly does want to make Gotham a better place. She tries to introduce some compassion into these people's lives so that they might reform, instead of treating prison like a place where they go to learn how to become a more serious criminal. Getting back to the first episode, Barbara attends a benefit for the GCPD aboard the Iceberg Lounge, but she would rather be anywhere else than there, hobnobbing with Gotham's high society. She clearly finds people like Harvey Dent, Ronnie Cobblepot and Bruce Wayne distasteful, and does her best to avoid them. Now, Ronnie Cobblepot is an important figure in this episode. As the Penguin's son, he had intimate knowledge of her operations and had been leaking information to her rival, Rupert Thorne. When Penguin was informed that one of her children had been tipping Thorne off, she murdered her other son, Aaron, thinking he might be the mole. Seeing his mother so callously murder his brother on a hunch puts the fear of God into Ronnie, so he seeks protection from Barbara Gordon, the only honest lawyer he knows, and she takes him to her father, Commissioner Gordon, to get police protection. On the way, Barbara and Ronnie are set upon by Penguin's henchmen, who brazenly open fire on them out in the open, with no concern about the possibility of the police arresting them. This is Gotham, after all. Barbara demonstrates how capable she is by firing back at the henchmen, while Ronnie holds the wheel. She has no aversion to using guns. She is, after all, a policeman's daughter. Similarly, when she takes Ronnie to the GCPD and he informs them of the massive cannon atop the Iceberg Lounge, Barbara is the one that rings the alarm, evacuating the building. When Detective Bullock, who, let's not forget, informed the Penguin what her son was up to and basically caused her to open fire on the GCPD, leaves a suspect handcuffed to his desk, it's Barbara that goes back and uncuffs her. I'd argue that already in this first episode the writers have demonstrated that Barbara is a hero. She doesn't need a costume to make a difference to people's lives. One of the other significant plot points for Barbara Gordon comes in her friendship with Dr. Harleen Quinzel. Barbara was not aware of Dr. Quinzel's own crusade against the lawful but awful elites of Gotham City. As their therapist, she was privy to many of their immoral secrets and how they exploited people to earn their fortunes. Dr. Quinzel would adopt a costumed identity of her own to empower herself to punish them for their transgressions, breaking them down at a psychological level by their Jungian archetypes and getting them to donate their wealth before killing themselves. It's something I talked about in my Caped Crusader Harley Quinn video a few months back, so I've linked to it in the little info button above. Check that out later if you'd like to hear more on the subject. One of Dr. Quinzel's patients, Fletcher Deming, attempted suicide but was foiled by Batman. Without his money, he was assigned Barbara Gordon as his public defender. It's not clear what charges he's facing, but Barbara visits him in Arkham, where he has a very strange reaction when Dr. Quinzel's name is brought up as a potential doctor. Upon hearing her name, Deming mutters,
"Harley Quinn,"
before barging his way past Barbara and sprinting up to the roof, where he tries to jump to his doom. Barbara is able to wrestle him to the ground until the orderlies show up and restrain him. This leads Barbara to ask her friend if she knew the man, and she claims that she doesn't. But Barbara knows she's lying and feels conflicted. When she visits Dr. Quinzel's office, she finds the door open and the place has been ransacked by the Batman. She demonstrates her detective skills by looking at the appointment book, which had a page ripped out of it, and makes a rubbing of the impression of the text to see what Batman had taken. This leads her to the home of one of Quinzel's other patients, a Mr. Hastings, who firmly tells Barbara to go away. Now, Barbara being Barbara, she doesn't take no for an answer and finds a way to sneak in. It's here that she discovers a costumed Harley Quinn and Batman unconscious inside of a cell. Baseball Batgirl to the rescue. Or at least she tries to rescue Batman, but in the process damages the door so badly that it can't be opened. Harley Quinn had set a bomb to destroy the house, but turned around when she spotted Barbara's car parked down the road. And this is a key point. Harley Quinn may torture and brainwash immoral businessmen, but Harley refuses to let her friend die and risks her own life to save Barbara. We see a further example of Barbara's heroism when the explosion happens and Harley and Barbara fall. Barbara manages to grab a nearby beam, as well as Harley, but can't hold on to the both of them. While Harley asks Barbara to let her go, she refuses, desperately trying to pull them both up, even though it's physically impossible, and they both plummet. Thankfully, Batman is able to catch Barbara. Batman chastises her, saying she was foolish to try to save him and to hold on to Harley, but she weeps. Not because she's injured or because Batman has upset her, but because her friend has seemingly perished. This causes Batman to pause, and in a hitherto uncharacteristic moment, he apologizes and disappears. Barbara never once looked at Batman. Instead, she looks down at the waves below that had consumed her friend. When she does turn around upon hearing police sirens, Batman has vanished. When we see Barbara in the episode Moving Target, she congratulates an elated client who she had just got off after the police fumbled his case. Barbara also determined that her client was a good man who simply made a mistake, so she's not too concerned about unleashing him on the streets. This leads to a conflict with her father, who states that Barbara's multiple shades of grey just don't work. There is right and there is wrong, and people know the difference between the two. Those that break the law should be punished, even if the process wasn't followed correctly by the police. He also states that the two cops from the case were good police, they just made a mistake. And Barbara cannily responds that if it's okay for police officers to make mistakes, why can't other people too? Her point of view is challenged when one of her former clients, identified only as Muller, puts out a hit on her because she didn't get him a better deal. Muller admits to doing terrible things, but feels that he doesn't deserve to be locked up with the awful people in Blackgate. The irony is that he completely fails to see that trying to murder someone justifies the prison sentence. Also, see how quick he was in trying to stab Batman. He's not some flawed but mostly good person that got caught up in things he shouldn't. He's exactly where he's supposed to be. They never say what crimes Muller committed, but they must have been bad for him to be put in solitary confinement. He also seems to be wealthy, given that he's able to pay a lot of money to have someone killed and bribes guards. This begs the question why he hired a public defender. Maybe he wasn't supposed to have access to that money. Perhaps he hired her because of her reputation for getting even the worst criminals the best possible deal. They never really say. All we know is that Muller is an awful person and he did not deserve Barbara's best efforts. At the end of the episode, Barbara is crestfallen and seems to be doubting her worldview. Having one of her former clients try to kill her was bad enough, but having one of her father's trusted officers, Detective Corrigan, try to claim that bounty was crushing. Barbara got her revenge, knocking Corrigan out, but her beliefs were shaken by the events of that episode, at least temporarily, because when Harvey Dent is disfigured for double-crossing the mob and goes on a crusade of revenge, Barbara acts as Harvey Dent's lawyer. Where Dent had previously mocked Barbara for her idealism, he now found himself on the receiving end of her brand of justice as she negotiated a deal for him. She will get him transferred to a mental hospital where he can get help, so long as he testifies against the corrupt officials of Gotham City. She argues that Harvey Dent was a victim, and he was not entirely responsible for his actions. She's not saying that he should be released, but there should be some clemency, particularly given his decade-long career as district attorney. And surprisingly, it's a view shared by Batman. Dent doesn't believe in being soft with criminals, unless they're from an elevated economic background, of course. But he is persuaded to take the deal. However, Dent clearly knew too much and wouldn't be allowed to testify. When Bullock and Flass kidnap Dent, Barbara follows them in her car, and when he escapes, she handcuffs herself to him to prevent him from resuming his murderous crusade. She literally acts as his conscience, telling him not to take things too far by murdering Thorne's henchmen. Barbara spends the rest of the episode handcuffed to Dent, who tries to persuade her to let him go multiple times. Both the furious Dent and the softer, more caring other guy want her to let him go for different reasons. Dent wants to kill those men and get his revenge on Thorne. The other guy only sees the night ending in death, and he doesn't want anyone to die protecting him. He feels he doesn't deserve it. Which is ironic because the other guy sacrificed himself to save Barbara from being shot by Detective Flass, leaving a confused Dent lying on the floor, wondering why he gave up his life to save her. And it's clear that the events of that night leave a mark on her, She knew Detective Flass. They weren't friendly by any means. She had caught him in the act during his scheme to release Firebug. But she was very clearly surprised that he would try to kill her, the daughter of the police commissioner. And seeing Dent die before her eyes must have been very traumatizing. However, what we know about Barbara is that she is resilient, fearless, and always tries to do the right thing. It's clear to us that, although her beliefs were shaken, she held firm in her philosophy around crime and punishment. She wasn't always successful, but she always tried to treat people fairly, even if she found them loathsome, like Ronnie Cobblepot or Muller. And I think that this version of Barbara Gordon does have a thirst for justice, but she satisfies that desire through her work as a public defender, and she really doesn't need to put on a costume to make a difference to people's lives. Okay, that's it for this video essay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd like to hear more about Batman Caped Crusader, why not check out our podcast Totally Shui Flipside, where my wife and I have gone through all 10 episodes. This is a spoiler-filled conversation about each episode in sequential order, so only check this out if you've watched the show or if you have no intentions of ever watching it yourself. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month, which will grant you early access to my video essays, and some supplementary perks like custom emojis, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, and community posts. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time I'm going to look at another prominent heroic figure from Batman Caped Crusader. We're going to be talking about Detective Renee Montoya and how she acts as a substitute for Detective James Gordon in this version of Batman's early days. Hope to see you then.